Hello, hi, a very happy good evening. So this is Krishna Ma'am. I'm going to talk about the story of life on earth, and that's biology. So welcome to my new beginning. So today we're going to talk or introduce a new unit, so that is plant physiology. So we are done and dusted with human physiology. So I believe so, because I have taught the entire human physiology in very short lectures as one or two very small topics I have split into, and that's how I have finished human physiology. So it took us quite some time, so we didn't finish human physiology overnight or within a week. So we took a good quantitative time to finish human physiology. So now we are in the next unit, so that is plant physiology. So I hope you guys enjoyed my teaching with human physiology, and you also benefited from human physiology, and you guys are now conceptually sound in human physiology. So now we are going or entering inside a new journey, so that is plant physiology. So plant physiology can be a bit tough because we are not native botanists or we are not native plant lovers, right? So we all want to become doctors because we love blood and flesh. Yeah, so not exactly only for human beings, but we love blood and flesh much more than the green plants. So that is why we don't like plant physiology. But let me tell you, if there are no plants, then we cannot survive, because remember, we are heterotrophs and the chief producers are plants. So at least for that gratitude, you have to study plants, right? So welcome to plant physiology. So plant physiology does not have as many examples as your plant anatomy and your morphology of flowering plants. But this plant physiology has a lot of concepts that you have to harness, and a lot of concepts that you have to logically understand in a practical world. If all these points are not there in the practical life, then our life would collapse any time, because we're all dependent on the green plants. So once again, so there was already a statement that was mentioned. If any species are getting extinct, so say for example, if a particular species of bird is completely becoming extinct, so we have many varieties of birds, right? So if a majority of the number of the birds become exist, a majority of the number of ants become exist, so on and so forth, so then the first race to get disappeared or first race to completely be erased will be the human race. Other organisms, other living creatures do not need us, but we need the biodiversity so much, but we fail to understand this, and we are spoiling our biodiversity to a maximum extent that we can. So that is really a very bad thing. So we have to wake up, we have to understand the importance of plants. So hence plant physiology. So you might ask, why? What is the need of a doctor to study plant physiology? So everything is interrelated. So if you don't know anything about plants, so you will not be able to tell why a person died sitting under a tree overnight. So you need to correlate everything. So that is the basic difference. So that is why you need to study plant physiology. And as I always say, you should always study a subject for the love of the subject, not just for marks. So if you study just for marks, so maybe it will not love you, the subject will not love you back, and it will not help you in your exams. So please love the subject. So that is all I would tell you. So here we move into plant physiology. So welcome to plant physiology. Yes, it has a lot of tricky concepts, but I hope these concepts will help you much better. So I hope I make the teaching much happier and much easier. So let's move forward. So what are the chapters in plant physiology? Because your plant physiology is a complete unit, right? So what are the chapters, or what are the topics in plant physiology? So first we have almost 5 topics here. So transport in plants, then we have mineral nutrition. So number 3 is photosynthesis in higher plants, then we have respiration in plants, then we have plant growth and development. So these are the 5 topics that we have under the unit plant physiology. So these are the 5 topics. So if you look at the numbers, so that is the percentage that is asked, or that is suggested by your NEET pattern, that is your NTA. So if you talk about transport in plants, it is just 1% weightage, but it has a lot of concepts that you need to understand and harness. So mineral nutrition is again 1%, and it does not have a lot of concept to remember. So photosynthesis in higher plants and respiration in plants are very important, because it has a lot of good concepts that you should understand. So photosynthesis, as you can see, has the maximum weightage here. So this has the maximum weightage, and then you have respiration in higher plants. So this is important because it has a lot of concepts, though the weightage is less. And the last one is plant growth and development. So this chapter is pretty huge. So the amount that you have to study is more, but it has a very less weightage. So these are the topics. But if you talk in terms of CBSE term 1, term 2, so plant physiology comes under term 2. So we do not have transport in plants, we do not have mineral nutrition, we do not have plant growth and development. So that simplifies it. So you only have the main topics, but it's okay. So there's nothing wrong to read because everything is important. So you also need to understand a lot of things in plants, a lot of things which we have not questioned in our practical life because it never comes away. You never know the need of a screwdriver until you need a screwdriver, right? So everything comes in handy. So it is good to be aware of everything. So that is what life is all about, right? So every day you have to learn something new, and that's equally important. So please do like, share and subscribe my channel. So please lend us your support. So you have a total weightage of 6% in plant physiology. So let's move forward and let's start with the first topic in plant physiology. So that is transport in plants. So let's move forward and let's see what we are going to talk about transport in plants. So transport in plants, so we have to introduce, so why we're going to talk about transport in plants. So we're going to talk about the means of transport, so how the plants transport. So how do you transport, or how do you commute from one place to the other? So by train, by bus, by car, by flight, by ship, by cycle, by walk. So how do plants do? So what do they transport? So your Amazon parcel comes by a truck, by courier service, right? So how does the plants transport from the root to the stem? That is what I mean by transport. So yes, we all know the plants do not move from one place to the other, right? So plant-water relationship. So what is the relationship of the plant with the water? So that is the next thing that we have to understand. Then long distance transport of water. So when your plant is very, very huge, so you say it's a tree, right? So some trees are very, very tall, like the eucalyptus. Now how does the water reach the top or the tip of the stem or the tip of the leaf from the root? So we do not water from the stem, right? We water to the root. So how does it reach the stem? The next one is transpiration. So transpiration is the loss of water. So we will address transpiration as well. So uptake and transport of mineral nutrition. So how does it happen? Then phloem transport. So phloem is used for the transport of food. So these are the topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. So let's talk about the introduction. So why this topic came into picture. So we move forward. So have you ever wondered how water reaches the top of the trees? So how does it move from the root to the leaf? So how and why substances move from one cell to the other cell? So why does the substance have to move from one place to the other cell? So if you say your cell is a superhero, it should be able to synthesize everything, right? So how and why substances move from one cell to the other cell, and what kind of substances move? So do they move in the same direction or do they move in a different direction? Whether energy is required for moving the substance or not. So these are the questions which made scientists wonder, and finally we came to a conclusion, and that is this chapter, you can say. So plants need to move molecules over long distance, but they do not have circulatory system. For example, recently we finished the topic chemical coordination and integration. So we had hormones. So the pituitary hormones like the gonadotropins has to travel and act on the gonads, right? So how does the hormones move? So they move through the blood. So they don't know how, the endocrine glands don't have the ducts. So they directly move through the ducts, right? So Pragati, hello. So a very, very happy good evening. So thank you so much for joining my class today. So please do like, share and subscribe. So today we are talking about plant physiology. So I'm just beginning plant physiology, and I guess you are here in the right time. So we are starting with transport in plants. I'm just giving you an introduction. So what is this chapter all about? So why it came into existence, and why in biology book, and why as a syllabus in NEET exam. So thank you for joining my lecture. Okay. So they do not have a circulatory system like we do, because our circulatory system is the base by which we transport a lot of substance, right? So plants do not have a circulatory system. So then how do they move the molecules? But they also need to move the molecules from the root to the stem. So how do they do it? So that is the question of the hour. So water, so at least water is needed, right? Ma'am, which is the masters of glands? So if you talk about the endocrine gland, the master of the endocrine gland is pituitary. So the largest gland is your liver. So there's nothing called as the master gland. So you have the master endocrine gland. So that is your pituitary gland. Okay, Pragati? Fine. So water is taken up by the roots to reach all parts of the plant up to the very tips of the stem. Because every part needs water, right? So you have photosynthetates. So photosynthesis happens in the leaf. So leaves are the organs of photosynthesis, right? So they need water for photosynthesis, right? And the food prepared has to be moved to all parts of the body. So now how does the food move again? So that was the next question. So movement across short distances within the cell, across the membrane, from cell to cell within the tissue takes place. Say for example, at least if it's a short plant, even within the cell, even between two cells, across the membrane, within a group of tissue has to occur. But how do they do it? How do they do it? How does the movement happen and what kind of substances move? So that was the major question. So in flowering plants, substances have to be transported because flowering plants need water, they need minerals, they need nutrients, they need organic nutrients, they need plant growth regulators, that is the hormones for flowering. So there are quite a few things that a plant requires. So over small distances, the substances can move by the process of diffusion. So diffusion is movement from higher concentration to lower concentration, right? So diffusion is movement from higher concentration to lower concentration. So if I have to move for a small distance, I don't choose a flight, right? So if I have to go to Jaipur from Kota, I will never choose an airlines, right? So there's no airport also, so that's a different story. But I would choose the most easiest and the most accessible transport system. So similarly, if substances have to move over a small distance, say they do so by diffusion or by cytoplasmic streaming, and it is mostly active transport, so they require a lot of energy, so that is active transport. So transport over longer distances proceeds through the vascular system, so that is xylem and phloem, and that process is translocation. So if I have to travel to another continent, say for example if I want to travel to Australia, of course I don't have a bus, right? You will take an auto, yeah, so that is the simplest way, right? But if I have to travel to another continent, so for example Australia, so now I'll have to choose something big, right? So similarly, when the transportation has to happen over long distance, so that process is called as translocation, and it is done by a vascular bundles, that is xylem and phloem. Fine. Now, what is the direction of transport? So, in which direction it will move? So, if I am a pilot, so if I am driving a plane, so I need to know in which direction I have to travel, right? So, that is one thing. So, you need to know which direction you're moving forward. So, direction is very important in many aspects that you do. In your studies, you need to find your direction. So, what is your destination? What is that you want? So, in your personal life, what is your direction? So, in many ways, you have to find direction. So similarly, what is the direction of the substances that move in your plant? So that was the next big question. So now comes the direction of transport. So the rooted plants, they transport in xylem. So through xylem, they transport your water and minerals. So that is unidirectional. So from the roots, what moves? So that is waters and mineral, right? So you water the plant in the root, so the water has to move up. So along with the water, there is some amount of minerals that is present in the soil that also has to be transported up. So your water and your minerals have to move up or be transported to the plant, and that is usually by xylem, and this direction is unidirectional. It goes up only one way. So you say, no, this road is one way, so in only one direction you can move. So the transport from the roots, that is mostly through the xylem, it is unidirectional. Fine. Okay, so organic and mineral nutrients are bidirectional transport. So there are some roads which are bidirectional, so you can move in both the directions. So mostly xylem is unidirectional and your phloem is bidirectional. Alright, so organic compounds are synthesized in your photosynthetic leaves. They are exported to all parts and they are stored and later re-exported. For example, your leaves produce food, right? So your leaves produce food and they use it up, and if there is extra, they store it in some storage organ. So you have your storage form of your stem, of your leaf, etc. So once they are in need of the food, so they are exported or re-exported from that particular part. Say for example, your radish or your carrot is a stored form of a root, okay. So your leaf produces food and it stores it in the leaf, it stores it in the root. So when the plant is in need of food, so the food moves from the root to the stem. So this transport of food is bidirectional, but transport of water is unidirectional. So mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots, transported up to the stem, leaves and the growing regions. Fine. So hormones or plant growth regulators plus other signals, they are transported in small amounts, polarized or in unidirectional manner. So hormones or plant growth regulators, they are transported in a unidirectional manner along with your water. Fine. So flowering plants have complex traffic of compounds moving in different directions. So just that the plant does not speak, just as the plant does not tell you what amount of complexity it is undergoing, it does not mean it does not have complexities. There are people who never say their problems outside, right? It feels so good to be with them because they are always positive. We feel that they are always happy in their life. But it might be sometimes that they do not share their problems out, or they do not let out negative energy. So much in the same way, the plant does not tell you how much of work it does, but it does a lot and it's pretty complex. So the amount of molecules moving inside causes a heavy traffic jam itself. So many substances move in and out of the plants. The plants have a separate defense mechanism as well, so we should not forget all that. So moving further, so how does the plants transport? So the first one is diffusion. So diffusion is movement from higher concentration to lower concentration, right? So diffusion, the movement through diffusion is passive, meaning it does not require any energy, so that is passive. So from one part of the other part of the cell, so from cell to cell or over short distances, it moves by diffusion, and diffusion needs no energy. Fine. The molecules move in a random fashion, so there is no particular direction, so they move in a random direction. So the net result is that the molecule moves from a higher to a lower concentration. But diffusion is a very slow process. It is independent of the living system. So diffusion can happen even outside a living system. So one beautiful example of diffusion is when you use a deodorant. Okay, so when you use a body spray. So when you use a body spray, what happens? The spray nuzzles out from the bottle, right? So in the bottle you have higher concentration and it moves outside, that is to lower concentration, right? That is also diffusion, and it happens outside the living system. It is a pretty slow process. It does not need any energy. So that is a beautiful example of diffusion. So diffusion mostly occurs in your gases and liquids. Fine. So what is most important is that so for the gaseous movements within the body, you need a diffusion. So that is the movement of your deodorant. So that requires your diffusion process. Fine. So what is important in the process of diffusion is the permeability of membranes separating them. So now higher concentration and lower concentration, there has to be a membrane, right? So what is the permeability of the membrane to allow the substance? What is the temperature? What is the pressure? So these things are important in terms of diffusion. So these are the things that we need to consider for diffusion, right? So yeah, so this is how the molecules diffuse. So this is how they keep moving. So this is diffusion. So now we're going to talk about facilitated diffusion. So what is facilitated diffusion? So facilitated is someone helping us. So someone who has a helping hand and then supporting the process of diffusion. So that is facilitated diffusion. So for facilitated diffusion, you need a gradient for the diffusion process. So what is a gradient? Oh wow, so Ronnie, hello. So thank you so much for joining me today. So I guess you are very new to my channel, so very happy good evening. So God says define dream and you say from career point to aims. Wow, what a beautiful comment. So thank you so much. So I hope I am of great help to you in helping you live your dreams. So thank you. So you are a dropper student or you are in class 12, so how can I help you? So I have started with human physiology. I am done with human physiology and I've just started plant physiology, and I am teaching you transport in plants now. So I hope you will like, share and subscribe my channel and lend us your support in reaching a lot of people. So I would like to touch a lot of people who cannot afford to a paid class but would like to afford to a free platform like YouTube, because your internet is pretty common these days, so everyone has to have net. So we are pushed into such a world. So I hope this is a free platform and I will do justice. So please do let your friends know about my channel. So thank you once again for joining. Okay, so let's move forward. So for the process of facilitated diffusion, you need a gradient. So gradient is a difference in concentration. So a difference in concentration has to be present. So for diffusion also you need a gradient. So you need to have a place where you have higher concentration, you need to have a place where you have lower concentration, right? So you move from higher concentration to lower concentration, right? So that is a gradient. So moving further, diffusion rate depends on the size of the substance. So smaller substance diffuse faster. That is true, right? So smaller the particles, they can easily move through the membrane, right? And that dream will be a dream always. Why not? So you can work hard to make it come alive. So why a dream will always be a dream? A dream is something that has to be lived. That is why you dream, right? So otherwise it's a nightmare. So don't do that. A dream has to be a dream. So I don't know how much I will be of help to you, but your hard work will always stay with you. So that is my humble advice. Okay, so let's move forward. So the diffusion rate depends on the size of substance. So smaller the substance, it will diffuse much quickly. Fine. So diffusion of a substance across a membrane depends upon the solubility of lipids. So which type of molecules will be allowed to pass through? So that is also important, because we have a plasma membrane. So our plasma membrane is made up of lipid bilayer. So I hope you remember biomolecules chapter. So we have a hydrophobic head and a hydrophilic tail, right? So we have the structure like this. So the round one is the head and the other one is the tail. So we have a structure like this. So this is basically lipid. So if the molecule that I want to pass across the membrane is soluble in lipid, then it is easy to diffuse. But if it's not soluble in lipid, now how is it going to move? So that is the question. So substances that are soluble in lipids, they diffuse much faster. So substances which are hydrophilic, which are not lipid soluble but which are water soluble, they have a difficulty to pass through, right? So thus the movement has to be facilitated. Now someone has to join or help or give a hand to pass the substances that are not lipid soluble but water soluble. Okay, fine. So moving further, so membrane proteins provide the site. Now who is going to come as a helping hand for the substances that are water soluble but not lipid soluble? So those are your membrane proteins. So prerequisite for your facilitated diffusion, that it has to have a gradient, a higher concentration and a lower concentration. So membrane proteins are going to help us, and again this is going to happen without the use of ATP. So, but this facilitated diffusion reaches a maximum rate when all the membrane proteins are filled. For example, if you're traveling by bus, the bus moves when all the passengers have come, right? So, never the driver will take the bus from the station when the bus is half empty. No, right? So, he will wait till all the passengers come and take up the places in the bus, and then he will move. Otherwise, he'll keep moving slowly so that the passengers keep coming. So, much in the same way, once all the membrane proteins are filled with the proteins that have to be transmuted, so that is when the process of transport is maximum. But facilitated diffusion is very specific. It will not pick every molecule, but it will only pick specific molecules, because again it has a problem. Because your who is going to pick up the molecules? Your membrane proteins. But your membrane proteins are sensitive to a lot of substances, so that it will not pick up a lot of molecules. It will only pick selective molecules so that it will not be destroyed. That is also important, right? So I will help you on the account that I will not be harmed. Though even I am not benefited, but I will not help you if I'm going to be harmed, right? So it has to be a proper balance, so much in the same way. So there are some channels that enable the molecule to pass through. So some channels are always open and can be regulated, but some are large. So how is that? So we have the facilitated diffusion. If you can see, this is the membrane protein. So the membrane protein helps in the process of facilitation, right? So this is how they move. So this is facilitated diffusion. Done? Okay, so let's move forward. So porins are proteins which have large pores of molecules to pass in the outer membranes of your plasters. So plasters are organelles, so which includes your chloroplast. So you know what are mitochondria, so the powerhouse of the cell, and some bacteria. So the membranes of your plasters, your mitochondria and your bacteria, so they have proteins called as porins that act as your facilitators to transport molecules, thus facilitating the process of facilitated diffusion. So allow molecules of small size proteins to pass through. So example, water channels, they are made up of 8 different types of aquaporins. So sometimes water also has to pass into the cell, right? So how does it happen? So it happens through porins, that is a water channel, right? So this is how it happens. So in the outer membrane you have channels called as porins that facilitates the transport of water molecules. So specifically aquaporins are for water molecules. Done? So we move further. So we have passive SYMPORTS and ANTIPORTS. So what are they? So this is all types of facilitated diffusion, if you agree. So each one is a type of facilitated diffusion, but they have a different way of transporting them. So every bus is different, right? So one is deluxe, one is super deluxe, one is sleeper, one is semi-sleeper. So we have varieties, right? So we have varieties here also. We are no different. So we are rich in diversity in everything. So we have varieties in everything, right? So in this type of facilitated diffusion, so where you have a carrier protein, so this is the one which carries, so this is your carrier protein. So carrier proteins are basically membrane proteins, right? So here only one molecule moves inside at a time. So one molecule, so this is the higher concentration and this is the lower concentration. It moves from here to here, right? So in SYMPORTER, so you have 2 molecules moving simultaneously from higher concentration to lower concentration. Fine. So here your SYMPORTERs can be your so here you have your glucose and your amino acids. So they move at the same time, right? And then antiporters, there are 2 molecules which move in the opposite direction. So this is the higher concentration of A and this is lower concentration of A. So this is higher concentration of B and this is lower concentration of B. So example of your antiporter will be Na plus and K plus ions. So these are different types of your facilitated diffusion. Now what is active transport? So active, so which requires a lot of energy. So when you're active, it means you have a lot of energy, right? So much in the same way. So it uses energy for the transport to pump molecules against the concentration gradient. So long you have been moving molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration. Now for a change, you're going to move molecules from lower concentration to higher concentration. So very simple, right? So in practical life, positivity is very less, negativity is very huge. So we have to push against the concentration gradient. So we have to go from the lower concentration to the higher concentration, which requires a lot of energy and effort. So that is your active transport, right? So I hope you understand the difference. So it is again driven by specific membrane protein. So you need the help of a lot of things here. So different proteins in the membrane play a role. So that is active plus passive are required here. So pumps are proteins here. So when I say I need a lot of pumps which can pump a lot of energy, so the pumps are proteins which uses the energy to carry out substances across the membranes. So transport substances from lower concentration to higher concentration. So it is an uphill transport. So this is lower concentration. So this is higher concentration. So it is going from low to up. So it is the uphill transport that you have to remember. So the transport rate reaches a maximum when all protein transporters are used, very similar to your facilitated diffusion. Again, the carrier proteins are very specific and the carrier proteins are very sensitive because they can be harmed by a lot of inhibitors. That is also one main criteria. So I have a picture of active transport. So it needs a lot of energy. Again, I need a carrier protein like your facilitated diffusion, but the only difference in your active transport and your facilitated diffusion is that it needs energy in active transport, and your active transport is against the concentration gradient. It moves from lower concentration to higher concentration, right? So yeah, so all the types of transport has been summarized here. So there are two types of passive transport. One is diffusion, other one is facilitated diffusion, the other one is active transport. So now you might ask me, ma'am, what is osmosis now? So hold on. So that is a story for tomorrow. So we'll talk tomorrow about what is what is osmosis. So this tabular column is directly from your NCERT, and I would want you to go through your NCERT. So I would want you to remember this tabular column or read this tabular column as well. So which of the following requires special protein membranes as transporters? So of course your facilitated diffusion and your active transport. So highly selective, so your membrane transporters which have your membrane proteins are highly selective. So transport saturates are present in facilitated transport and your active transport. So then you have uphill transport, that is only active transport because it moves from lower concentration to higher concentration. So which requires energy? So that is only your active transport. So the last 2 points are very specific for your active transport, and types of transport are very important. So not to forget, never to forget them, right? So I hope the first introduction to plant transport in plants is clear. So tomorrow we'll be talking about water potential, which has a lot of concepts to understand. So please join me tomorrow at 5:15, and please do like, share and subscribe. So please do join me tomorrow at 5:15 p.m. as well. So until then, this is me signing off. So take care and have a great evening. Bye.